welcome to our next Resilience Matters in the series. I find myself thrilled today to be joined by Georgina Kvassay, who's a career coach and a consultant who helps businesses and individuals with their recruitment challenges. So welcome, George. Lovely to have you here today.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So tell everybody a bit about yourself.
Right, so I've got about 20 plus years in recruitment experience. So I used to head up student recruitment at a professional services firm, and I've also worked sort of globally and worked across the HR function, but mainly across recruitment. My passion is really around kind of helping people in that transition phase between sort of college, university into the workplace, and I set up the development team at KPMG to help them with that whole moving from student life to work life. And now I work independently. So I work as an interview skills coach. I work with people, helping them identify what they want to do and how they want to go about doing that. And I also help people in that sort of, again, transition phase in the first sort of 6 months to a year in their new role. So lots of sort of early careers, but I also help people further down in their careers with interview skills and getting the job.
Oh, wow. And some of the hardest thing is, like you say, finding out what you want to do as well as getting that job, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess don't know what I'm going to do long term. I always think, nobody's different. I think people sometimes worry, don't they, about the fact that they've got to have a job that's going to be the next thing for life. And actually, it's not how it works nowadays.
No. There's an amazing... Yeah, I say there's an amazing book called The 100-Year Life, and it actually says, that this whole idea about one career, it's not going to work anymore, that actually we need to be prepared to develop and grow and maybe have two or three whole sort of like careers, as it were, in our life. So always a skill that we need. Yeah,
totally. And I guess, for particularly school leavers, the job hunt, you've got to be quite resilient, I assume, How do you help people prepare themselves, and build their resilience for that job hunt?
I think there's quite a few things to kind of bear in mind when you're looking for jobs. I think that there's that whole daunting aspect of, oh my God, this is it. This is for life. I've got to be good at this. I've got to know exactly what I want to do. And kind of being aware that actually it's just thinking about sort of almost stepping stones. This doesn't have to be the rest of your life. It can be thinking about skills that you can develop at each stage that will get you to the next point. I mean, some people have got like a real passion. They know exactly what they want to do. And other people just don't know. And that's okay. It's thinking about what will give me skills that I can develop and work on to get me to the next stage. And I think that the recruitment process is really tough right now. I think recruiters on the whole are busy, and some of them are quite not great at actually getting back to you. So, it's helping candidates to understand that actually, if you don't hear back, it's okay. It's all right to face. It's okay to do a follow-up, because it seems that the recruitment world is busier and busier, and people aren't necessarily as quick as they could be at getting back. And I think a lot of people are quite overwhelmed by that feeling that, oh gosh, I've not heard. It's been 2 days. I must be rejected. And trying to get them to kind of think, actually, it's okay. Think about it kind of from more of a long-term perspective. It's like a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. I guess there's that bit about, worry about things you can control, not the things you can't control. That is something that's just uncontrolled, that's out of your control. And like you say, leave that to work itself out, I guess.
Yeah, and just being quite realistic about what's out there for you and what time frame. So quite often I say to candidates, if you've gone for an interview, at the end of one of the questions can be like, what is the next stage and when can I expect to hear? Because then you've got a realistic expectation of what to expect yourself. Yeah. And you're writing a thank you note afterwards. That you enjoyed it. I'd love to find out more. I enjoyed these things about it. So just being quite proactive, I suppose, in the way that you approach that whole sort of the job search.
Yeah. And I guess as well, what is that rejection piece as well? How do you keep going and stay motivated and driven and, when you have had knockbacks, because it will happen.
Yeah. And that's absolutely right. I think if you got the first job you ever went for, every time you did that, it just wouldn't mean the same. So you want to feel like you've really earned it and achieved it. I think just try not to take it personally. So I was working with one girl who had taken sort of a route. She'd done a sort of sandwich placement in university, so a 1-year business placement, and had gone into sort of a recruitment type role. And she was trying to think, actually, maybe I'd be better in a sort of buying role. Maybe this isn't right for me. And she'd applied for lots of buying roles and kept getting rejected. And, you know, we'd worked together on her CV, on like her cover letters. It was all in the right direction. Everything was looking good. And, you know, you can't always get feedback, but she did ask for feedback. And the feedback, all they said was everything was great. Her salary expectations were too high. So she started off on sort of 24, but actually as an entry-level buyer, you're on around 21. And she was just getting rejected because she just put on the application really where her salary expectations were. And although, you know, she can change that quite easily, it was something she hadn't even anticipated. So just getting that bit of feedback made her think, actually, it's not me, as in it's not my competence, it's not how good I am, it's actually just about my own expectations and how I need to change the parameters of that.
Yeah, and it's about, like you say, that there's that bounce back and that resilience to go for the next one. And then you're saying, you know, there's about that self-awareness and you know, getting that feedback as well, so that you can improve, you know. And does self-awareness come into it, you know, in building your resilience for that, do you think?
I think absolutely. I think being aware of what your own skills are and where you are good and how you can demonstrate that you've got the competencies. So really, you know, don't walk into an interview unprepared or an application. It's really about thinking, what are they looking for and how can I demonstrate that I've done that, or things that I've done that would be similar. Like, you don't have to have said, you know, I've done everything, I'm great at everything, but it's thinking, okay, you know, I might not have developed one particular strategy, but this is what I've done that is similar. And really thinking through, you know, your own, you know, awareness of what you've done, what you've done successfully, because you know, interviewers are still using competency-based interviews. So you know, looking at what you've done in the past is a good predictor of how you will work in the future. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best way of interviewing, but it's the way that a lot of interviewers are working. So being able to demonstrate, you know, here's an example of when I've done this, or something similar, will help you to be, you know, really aware of what you've done and really aware of what their expectations are of you.
And that must be incredibly hard, particularly sort of early in your career, because you're thinking, well, I know I can do it, but how do I show that experience? So you kind of like, you have your own sense of self-worth perhaps, but actually it's getting that over to somebody else that you do have those abilities.
And it's really interesting because I find that, you know, I'm working with like year 11s and year 13s in schools who have to write their CV for the first time, and they're like, I haven't done anything. And I said, but you have. Actually, you know, you've been on school production, so you've had to, you know, work with other people. You've had to work in teams. You might have been, you know, practicing a musical instrument, which needs determination and resilience and motivation. You might have worked in a cafe or in a shop. You've been able to manage customer expectations. You've been able to tally up the till at the end of the day. There's so many things that people don't even realize are really useful skills that are transferable into the workplace that they don't even think about. You know, G of E, for example, you know, Duke of Edinburgh Award, people have done that and actually had to work in teams, dealt with adversity. You know, things don't necessarily go according to plan. How do you handle that? How do you cope with that setback and that resilience? And that, you know, that all looks great to an employer. And how do you strive to kind of show that you want to continue to learn? Because continual learning is a massive thing for an employer, and that's really part of having a growth mindset, you know, wanting to improve yourself. And anything that you can do to show your employer that you want to continue to learn, that you want to develop yourself further, looks really positive to an employer. Totally.
And I guess, you know, just hearing you talk there, you know, when I think of you know, a competency model as well, you know, that there's technical knowledge and there's potential and there's capability. And I guess, you know, what you're talking about there is demonstrating that capability and them seeing that potential in you. Yes, you're driven, you're done Duke of Edinburgh and stuff, and being able to prove that even if you haven't got the technical knowledge, that is just knowledge. Anyone can learn knowledge. The capability is harder, and if you've
That's
got
right.
Yeah,
and I think I really notice when I'm working with women, and this is a bit of a generalization, but some women think if I can't do every single thing on the job spec, I can't apply for the job.
Yeah.
And actually, there's so much that you can do and that you have the potential to do, but it's taking that leap that feels quite daunting. Whereas some people will work on the proviso that, I can do about 30% of it, I'll just wing the rest. And it's just complete opposite mindsets of, people's confidence and belief in themselves that they can do it. So I think, knowing that you can do a certain proportion of the job, but with a growth mindset and the ability to kind of develop yourself and learn, and your willingness to learn is a really good thing. Thinking that you can only go for the jobs that you can do everything on. I mean, you'll only be able to do the jobs that you can do everything on is in the role that you're currently doing. And actually, if you want to move and you want to develop, you need to demonstrate how you can operate at the next level. Which you're quite daunted by, I think.
I think it's quite interesting because that's something that we'll hit throughout our careers, won't we? Every time you want to move on, you'd be thinking, well, what's my mindset? Do I think I can do it? Or am I going to start suffering from imposter syndrome before I even apply for my next job? And I think there's some interesting stuff now around, certainly with imposter syndrome, that it's not just women, men suffer from it as well, that you just don't have that self-belief and that confidence that you need to have to go and say that, that growth mentality, growth mindset that says, I don't know it now, but I know I'm capable of doing it. Sometimes with support, sometimes maybe self-starting, but I am capable of doing it.
And here are examples of when I've done something similar in the past where I've had to, which can be really valuable.
And I tell you what surprised me with my coaching as well. That happens at every layer of an organisation. I can remember when I first had to coach a director, I was like, oh my God, isn't there everything? So I had probably had imposter syndrome going in. And he said, oh, I'm worried I'm going to get caught out soon. That, and it happens to all of us, particularly changing careers or starting a career, but it happens. I think to most people, when they get promotional change, it's and it's interesting you talk about the growth mindset. Obviously, Alison and I are massive advocates and driven, but I'm also a mother. So as I'm talking to you, George, I am constantly thinking of my daughter, going, right, how do you try and help those school leavers or people going into work to have that growth mindset? Because it is a practice, isn't it?
It really is. And I think as well, the past 2 years haven't helped anyone, right? So especially young people who have been, I guess, feeling a bit more disadvantaged. They haven't been able to do the things they would normally do. And I run workshops and people aren't turning their cameras on because they're afraid to be seen. They're not even joining because they're afraid of being in that situation. So I think one of the real big kind of lessons is around kind of putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations. Because, I ran a workshop yesterday and it's a goal setting and growth mindset workshop. And one of the participants, I sort of said to him, can you turn your camera on? He said, I'd rather not today. And then he saw everyone else was participating. And we do sort of a thing where I get them to just share a recent photo from their phone of something they've done. And then that kind of breaks the ice and gets them to talk to each other. And he realized actually it was quite a safe environment. It wasn't horrible. And actually he turned his camera on. And I said to him, you're even just doing that is demonstrating a growth mindset. You've done something that feels a bit uncomfortable, but you've done it. And actually, how is it feeling? And quite often it's the fear of what might happen, but actually doing it isn't that bad. And I find that a lot with even with my own children going for their vaccination, their COVID vaccination, the fear of having it was so much worse than actually doing it. So, and it's even we've got A-levels coming up in our house. The fear of doing them and actually sitting it and doing it are two different things. And it's the same with the process and kind of going for an interview. It's that anticipation beforehand, and then actually once you're in it, it's not always as bad as you think. And it's all about preparation, and it's about thinking about what you can demonstrate to show that you can do these things. And the more you prepare, the more flowing it will be. Look at job specs, a gift, right? They're giving you an outline of what they want from you. The website, what the company does, are all going to give you information. And the more you can research that, even just Googling the company, what's happening in the news, what people are saying about them, all that stuff builds a picture that helps you look like you're really enthusiastic. You know what you're talking about. You are going above and beyond. And as a recruiter, someone who has done a bit of research, read beyond kind of just the core website, maybe they've joined the socials, they've looked at what that company is saying. That to me shows as somebody that's got a growth mindset, that's keen to kind of develop themselves and keen to kind of be good in the role.
Yeah, and I guess as a recruiter, you want that person to fit in, right? So if they've done all that and they still like you and they still really want to be there, then that kind of reduces the risk a little bit to the recruiter, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that resilience we've talked about, and I do agree. I think sometimes the more we step out of a comfort zone, the greater the tolerance becomes as well. So that actually a comfort zone stretches in that. But Alison and I, we've done a lot of research, and at the CIPD conference last year, now they talk about, because we don't know what the future holds, actually the key skills of the future are all around resilience and agility, to cope with that change. I guess with that focus that companies have in this ever-changing world, how do they demonstrate that they're resilient? What sort of advice would you give someone that they're agile and resilient?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the world of work is changing so dramatically, and employers want people to be resilient before they even walk in the door. So the process will ask questions, and quite often people think, why would they ask me about this? But actually, talking about a time when you've dealt with a challenge, a time when you faced a setback, or a time when you've had to handle change, demonstrates to the employer that actually you've done it in the past. You are going to be able to do that kind of thing in the future. So it makes sense to them to ask those kind of questions. And it's interesting because some candidates that I work with are like, oh my God, it sounds like it's going to be a really awful company to work for, because all they're doing is asking about difficult situations I've been in. And actually, they just want to know, how do you deal with that? How do you walk away the minute things get tough? Do you kind of just run and hide, or do you embrace it? And how do you handle that? That uncertainty, when you've got a bit of ambiguity. Do you kind of go, oh, I'm just going to wait for someone to tell me what to do, or do I actually say to my line manager, right, okay, this is what's happened. I don't really know what to do next. Here are 2 things I think I could do. And then you'll get, yeah, that's a great idea. Or have you thought about this? And it's interesting because a lot of the people, like when I was a line manager, the people who are working with me would find it really difficult, because they'd come up to me going, what do I do? And I'd say, what do you think you should do? And they'd be like, they get so frustrated. And I'd be like, but yeah, give me an idea. What solution do you think you've got? And actually, you feel much more empowered in that situation, right? So, a lot of the people I work with are talking about having this parent-child relationship with their boss, and actually it doesn't have to be that way. But they feel like they've constantly got to check, is this okay? Is this okay? And at the beginning, of course, when you're in a new job, you do want to check what you're doing is okay. But actually, the more you can think for yourself and go, right, this is a bit of a tricky one. I've not dealt with this before. This is what I think I'll do. I'll just send that to my line manager. And them then saying, yeah, brilliant, or what about this, then makes them feel like, actually, I know how to handle that in future.
Yeah.
So that builds confidence, that builds strength, that builds that whole mindset that I can do this. Whereas if you're constantly begging for sort of approval, then you're never going to feel that you're able to be empowered. So demonstrating, I mean, I've kind of linked 2 together, how you operate on the job, but actually demonstrating of how you've done that in the past in the recruitment process will stand you in really good stead. And I think also, things aren't always going to go right, and they're not always going to go according to plan. But what you learn from it as a result is what is really important.
Yeah.
There was this example of this girl I was working with, and she was saying that she had to work. She's working for a very small business, and they were packaging stock. So she had to package the stock that all needs to be sent out. And so she'd packed up everything beautifully. She'd wrapped it really nicely. She'd boxed it up and she'd left it in a room to be sent out the next day. And she wasn't working on the Friday. So everyone knew that it needs to be just literally sent out and gone. Her boss, who was the owner of the company, decided to go in and double check, do a bit of quality control. So he went in, opened all the boxes, checked everything and left it there. So on the Monday she came in, she got into trouble because she hadn't the box hadn't been sent out. Mm-hmm. She was livid because obviously she hadn't expected this. So there is this opportunity then to have well, you said this and I said that, and this is having a bit of a debate or an argument or a fight or whatever. And actually, the key thing for her was to say, right, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? Yeah. Can we bring quality control earlier? Can we make sure that you're happy before I've sealed the packaging and beautifully wrapped it and put the seals on and the labels and whatever? The big learning of what did I do as a result? What thing have I done differently as a result of whatever difficulty I faced? It doesn't matter that things went wrong, that weren't. And I think people are so frightened of that failure, that they don't allow themselves that opportunity to go, actually, what have I learned from that? What have I learned from this opportunity? Which makes it, the biggest learning and the kind of the best kind of recruit, right? Someone who's actually aware of what's happened and actually learned from it and done things differently as a result.
And I think I would say, like, building on that actually, if you've got somebody who goes, oh, actually, no, nothing's ever gone wrong, my first thought would be, have they actually stepped out their comfort zone? Have they actually pushed themselves and stretched themselves? Because if everything's gone smoothly, where is the growth? Where is the learning? So, yeah, you want somebody sitting there going, well, yes, actually, this happened, because it shows that this is somebody who's willing to stretch and learn, and also willing to make mistakes because they've got the confidence that they can learn from it and do it differently going forwards.
And it's really difficult, isn't it? Because a lot of people think, I can't tell the employer that things went wrong, because then they might think I'm not good enough. And actually, it's just thinking about where the challenge lay. Like, what was the hardest thing about that thing you dealt with? And actually, again, what did you learn from it? We talk about in the interview skills workshops that I run, or when I'm talking to people about interviews, what are your weaknesses? And I hate that as an interview question.
I hate that word. Yeah.
And I never, ever ask it. But I do say to people, okay, what development areas do you have? Or what do you need to develop to be successful in the role? And actually being self-aware and knowing that actually in this role, I will have to step up. So I'll need to understand more senior stakeholder engagement, or I might need to get better at different things. That's important to learn and be aware that actually I know I'm not perfect and I have got things to develop, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm weak or I have a weakness. So, I think it's really important for people to kind of be aware of things that they need to develop and things they need to work on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a weakness.
It's about that conscious incompetence. It's the people who don't know what they don't know, if you know what I mean, the conscious, whichever way around it is. But, it's that self-awareness. And I know certainly it's something that we talk about a lot, about taking time out to reflect and what the learning points are. So I think whether it's a school leaver, out of uni, or career change, I think that's so important. Like you say, it's not a weakness, but taking that time for your own self-awareness to say, yeah, I've made mistakes, but hey, this is what I've done differently. Because that's what people want to hear, isn't it? Or yes, it's not perfect, but this is what I'm going to do. Or, like you say, you feel that you're showing your weaknesses, don't you? Your Achilles heel. But if it's done with learning, then that's great, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you touched on it there when you actually go in, a job. And I can imagine, like you say, straight out of school and uni as well, that you help mentor them, which I think is great, because getting the job is when you get it that the journey actually starts, isn't it? How do you help them be resilient? And that example with the package, how do you help them grow and learn? And
I mean, we work quite a lot on this sort of the two halves of the brain when it comes to positive mindset and growth mindset and fixed mindset, I suppose. And and it depends on the day of the week or how you're feeling. There are going to be times when you're going to feel a bit more sort of fixed and like, this is my limit today. but actually talking about those times when you can, really reflect on the feedback and look at, ask for feedback first of all, because a lot of people don't. And actually that's the best thing you can get is information about, how was that, or coming out of a meeting. And this is the great thing about, the more face-to-face interactions we can have. You can walk out of a meeting and say, how did I come across? Did that come across well? Whereas actually in a Zoom, you're a little bit more constricted, aren't you?
Yeah.
But getting the feedback and actually thinking, okay, what can I learn? How can I develop? And I say this, but when I say take the feedback and get feedback, that kind of does rely on a line manager being good at giving feedback.
Yeah.
So people see feedback as a criticism and go, oh my God, I'm not good enough. They've just told me that and I've failed, or I've not done well enough. Actually, if you're getting some feedback, what can you do with it? How can you grow from it? What can you do differently? And actually, if you feel that the feedback's unfair, and actually it's not really, you can't really work out how you can improve on it, challenge them. Don't be afraid to say, can you tell me about when I've done that? Can you tell me about the impact that had? Because actually sometimes people will have a bit of a niggle about a person and not be able to articulate what it was that actually they did in the situation that made not great. So it's how to get the evidence that will say, okay, so what can I do differently next time? I'm not actually sure then, what I did. How do I? And don't be afraid to ask. So in that situation, this is the information I had. This is how I handled it. If I was put in the same situation again next time, what could I have done differently? If you're not entirely sure yourself, because actually putting them in that situation can sometimes help the line manager to realise actually it wasn't your fault. It was about our own process or the way that we do things. But I really think it's important as well to sort of set goals, like small goals of things that you want to improve on, things that you want to develop, and be quite realistic about, how you're going to achieve them. Check in on them every so often. I always say to them, give yourself sort of 20 minutes every sort of 3 or 4 weeks to kind of go, okay, how am I performing against the things I want to achieve? Because a lot of people are in a role that they don't want to be in forever. They want to move into something else, but you can end up getting bogged down in the day-to-day stuff, and you're just doing the job, aren't you? And then you forget that actually to put your head up above the parapet and go, okay, how am I doing here? Where am I performing? I'm working with lots of more senior people who've got into jobs, and they're like, how did I get here? Like, what and I think, you do, don't you? You kind of get good, you kind of move on, you get promoted, and then you're in a role actually you don't enjoy that much. You're kind of not that satisfied in, but you're used to the salary, or you're used to the the perks and the benefits that comes with that. And actually that whole check-in, the whole sort of sitting up and kind of going, okay, what is it I'm actually wanting to achieve? How am I getting there? Can really help you start focusing on what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I know, doing work for apprentices as well, I think sometimes they can internalize it and overthink things a little bit. But the nice thing about apprenticeships or grad programs, they do have their own herd. They have a network of people. So I guess it is as well building some of that networks, isn't it? And to learn from others. And
yeah,
as well.
Absolutely. And that really helps. The more you can sort of speak to other people who are in a similar kind of position to you, you can realize you're not alone. It's not just you. And I really encourage people to use LinkedIn as much as possible, and not just as here's my profile, I'm connected with these number of people. It's actually joining groups, being around people who have similar interests or passions to you in the work environment, that will help you then to think about what's my feed being populated with, what am I learning about the industry I'm in or the area I want to go into, and how do I start to build my connections, build my network, so that actually when I am looking for a job, people will go, oh yeah, I know that Johnny's looking for a role like that. What better gift to an employer to be out there knowing that that you might be interested in the role, rather than putting a job advert out, having 200 applicants that are all not that great. So, building your network in that way, I really encourage, because it then helps you then to start being in the forefront of people's minds when it comes to the job search.
Absolutely.
Really nice. I cannot believe we've run out of time. I knew this would happen, George. I guess what I am with my pet, your top tips, the advice, and in your close, what would it be? What would be your key takeaways?
I think it's the whole thing about being positive in your attitude, right? So thinking about what you might like to do, even if it's not, you know, it could be a long-term dream that you want to work in a certain industry or in a certain profession. You know, what steps can you start to take to get you into that? It's not for life. It doesn't have to be forever. So thinking about transferable skills, things that you've done in the past that you can definitely demonstrate in a role, thinking about the role you're going into, how you can continue to learn and develop and grow, putting yourself into uncomfortable situations that actually help you to learn and develop, and really thinking about, you know, those setbacks, those things at times when things haven't gone right. What have I learned? And what can I demonstrate that I can develop so that I'm really, you know, someone who is, you know, an employer would want to recruit, because I'm willing and I'm able to kind of deal with change and manage it.
Yeah. Wow.
Wonderful.
Noted. Thank you, Georgina. Honestly, always lovely speaking to you. And, you know, hopefully, you know, it will be really useful, not just people on LinkedIn, but all of our networks who are mothers and fathers and have those around us, or indeed wanting to make a change or find themselves in a redundancy situation. So thank you so much for sharing your insight. I think it's been amazing.
Thanks,
really.
George.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's brilliant. So we will be continuing our Resilience Matters series, talking to a number of people across a variety of industries and sectors and functions. So if any of our network does want to be part of this series and talk, then I'm just bringing up our website. You can contact us at www.ivegotthis.co.uk. That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks, George.
Thanks.